Alright friends, in this video we're going to be going over the transform tools in MatterControl. So if I select an object and then right click on that object, it'll bring up this menu. If we come to modify and then here to transform, we have three options: translate, rotate, scale, and mirror. And I'm just going to quickly go through each of these and show you what it does. Alternatively, we can get to that menu by selecting our object, coming over here to this menu, transform, and then we also have those options here. So let's start with translate. Translate is pretty basic. What it allows you to do is move an object around your modeling environment by specified amounts. So let's say that I wanted to move this block along the x-axis 50 millimeters. There we go, we moved it 50 millimeters. We can do the same thing. Let's say that we wanted to bring it along the y-axis negative 50 millimeters. There we go, we brought it forward. And let's raise it 20 millimeters. So, pretty basic. It just allows you to move those objects around your modeling environment by specified amounts. Alright, next up we have rotate. And I've thrown together this goofy looking object so that it's easier to see that this is actually rotating. So over here, after we selected our object and rotate, we can select what axis we want to rotate around. So we can, I'm not sure why they do back, up, and right. I think it would be better if they just did X, Y, and Z, but it is what it is. So if we select up, we are going to rotate around the Z-axis. And down here, this will adjust how much we rotate. So as you can see, we are rotating around the Z-axis. We can select back, which is going to rotate around the Y-axis. There we go, we are rotating around that Y-axis. And then right's going to rotate around that X-axis, like so. So we also have this option here called offset. And what offset is going to do is move this rotate point, so the point that we're actually rotating around. So let's try adjusting this a little bit. Let's set this to 10, see what that does. So you can see that moved this rotate point back towards the middle of our object here. Let's move it down 10. So now you can see it's a little bit off, but almost right in the center of this big strange object. So now if we rotate, it's going to rotate around itself instead of before when it was up here and it was rotating in that strange way. So now you can see that is going to change the way that our object rotates. So that's what our offset does. And we can do that for each one of our different axes that we want to rotate around. So that's the rotate tool. Our next tool is going to be the scale tool. And let me briefly explain why the scale tool is so useful. If we look at these two objects, the cube and the sphere, when we drag in the cube, off here we can manipulate the size of this in the X, Y, and Z directions. So we can manipulate width, depth, and height independently. Now with the sphere, we only have one measurement, and that's diameter. And that's going to increase, you can see that it increases in depth, width, and height proportionally when we change this diameter setting. So let me really quickly, let's change this and make kind of a sphere shape, or not a sphere shape, a gem shape, because I think it'll be a little bit easier to see what I'm talking about. So let's say that I was making a gem. If you played Legend of Zelda, I'm thinking of the gems off of there. So we've kind of got this gem shape here, but it's very squatty. Like, generally for a gem shape, you would want it to be a little bit thinner width-wise here, or depth-wise, and then taller. But as you can see, since we created this object out of our sphere, and the only measurement we can manipulate as diameter, it's just going to change that proportionally. So if we want to change that, we can come here to modify, transform, and then scale. And now scale is going to allow us to manipulate the measurements of this in the X, Y, and Z directions, just like we're able to do with our cube. Now one thing to take note of is this lock proportion option right here. If you're trying to change the proportions of it, you're going to want to set this to none. Otherwise, if it's X, Y, and Z, no matter what you change here, it's going to scale proportionally. So let's come to none, and let's change our depth to maybe not that drastic. Let's try 15. And then let's also change our height to be 50. So that's much more of your traditional cartoon gem shape. And that's where the power of the scale tool comes in, is it allows you to change the dimensions of objects and the X, Y, and Z directions, even though that might not be a base setting. Another example of that would be the cylinder, where you can change the diameter and the height, but you can't independently change X and Y. Same with the cone. So there's a lot of shapes where that scale tool is going to come in helpful and allow you to manipulate the shape of it in ways that you otherwise could not. Another thing that I forgot to mention with the scale is that you can change it directly, so you can input the exact measurements you want, or you can do it percentage-wise. Either one works, it's just a preference of what you want it to be. So if I wanted my width to be 50% of the depth, I could do that. Oh, see, I forgot to take it off lock proportion, so it changed the whole thing proportionally. So just remember to do that when you're working with the scale tool. But now, as you can see, my width is now 50% of my depth and height. So that's just another option within the scale tool. Okay, our final tool for this video is going to be the mirror tool. And as you can see, as soon as I click on it, it mirrored my object. So before this green pyramid was on this side, I click mirror and it created the reverse of that. It flipped it around, so now the green is pointing the other way. And the only thing to go over with this is just that you can change which axis it's going to mirror around. So if I click Y-axis, this red is going to flip to the back. There we go, flipped it to the back. And Z-axis is going to flip it so that blue, which was on top, is now on bottom. So that's another tool that you have. Nothing too complicated, but can come in handy. One quick thing before we close this video that I think is worth mentioning. Sometimes when you're trying to create something, like let's say I'm trying to create this gem shape, you might get a little ambitious and you might come over here and skip to the scale option before you specified that you only needed 6 sides on there. And now you're like, dang it, I'm locked out of that. Like, I can't get back to that. So if that happens, what you want to do is come up here to your object list, and we have our object selected here. It's set to scale, but if we click down on this, usually we can get back to those base settings. So there we go. Now I'm back to that. I can adjust my sides down to 6, my latitude sides all the way down, and then I can come back to my scale and adjust it from there. Just like that. So, just a quick hint for you. Sometimes you might think you got locked out from going back and adjusting those base settings. And in the past, that kind of was the case, but they've updated it so that you can usually get back to those base settings and manipulate it. Alright guys, so that does it for this video. Hopefully this video wasn't too useless. Hopefully you found something in there to be helpful. If you did, then I guess I'll see you in the next one.